Hey, so today I'll be doing a diagnostic video and show you how to run through a really simple diagnostic that you don't need a whole ton of fancy tools for, and something that you can do to figure out a lien condition, or if you get a code for a P0171, Bank 1 or 2 System 2 lien. I'll show you how to run through it pretty easily. So with Toyotas, that code specifically, the P0171, is super common in pretty much all Toyotas of every year that I've seen. And it has burned a couple people. I see people talking about it online all the time, and some of them just never figure it out. So I'm going to run you through a bunch of things that I found, and we're going to do the actual diagnostic on this car, and I'll show you what I did to figure this thing out. So let's get into it. So the first thing that you need to do is verify that the concern is present. Customer came in for a check engine light. They said they scanned it and had the 0171 code, but I still want to verify. So I did clear the code because I've already figured this issue out, but I hooked up my scan tool, and you don't need anything this crazy. You can get a parts store scan tool that does read, erase codes, and some of them even do live data. They're around, I think, $100 to $250, just depends on what you get. They're just fine. This one's bi-directional, those at the parts store aren't, which means that I can control motors, servos, stuff like this, and programming through here. You can't do that on parts store stuff. Again, for this type of diagnosis, you don't need all of this. So anyways, I scanned the car and the code is present, so I verified the condition. The next thing I want to do is isolate any related issues. So let's take a look at that. All right, so I'm going to crank the car up. For a lien condition, you're going to see that there isn't really much of a difference that you're going to notice in this case. However, I will show you the other case here in a second. So in the condition of this car, there was no difference at all that you could tell other than the stupid light being on. Again, the light's probably going to be off when I crank this because I have diagnosed it and haven't replaced the part yet, but I have the original part. I got it to function. I'm still going to replace it regardless. So here we go. This is how this car specifically sounds. The lights went out. It's a cold start, so it's gonna idle a little higher, but I hope that you can hear the engine's running smooth. There's no misfires. If a lien condition gets big enough, it will misfire. However, in this case, it's not, and in most cases that I've seen, it doesn't. The other case would be a vacuum leak that's large enough to affect airflow. Let me see if I can replicate that. So if a vacuum leak is large enough to affect airflow, you're going to get an RPM bounce. While you're sitting on idle, it's going to try to flutter. I'm going to see if I can replicate that. Let's see, I think I did. Just like that. So that would be an external vacuum leak. Also, I'm not sure if you can hear on the camera. If I go back under the hood, I'll try to get it. You can hear the hissing from the vacuum leak. That would be a related symptom. Now here I got some light. All I did was disconnect this hose to simulate a vacuum leak. So now that we have our related, or if we could not find any related symptoms, we're going to move on to the next step. So our next step is to simply analyze our symptoms. Think about the path we're going to take with this diagnosis. So for this car specifically, like I said, there was no RPM bounce, there was no misfire, I couldn't hear any hissing under the hood or anything like that. Here's the steps that I'm going to take. A simple breakdown of this motor is a typical 4-cylinder with a plastic intake It does have an actual PCV valve, a electronic throttle, and that's about it. Pretty simple. Let me see if I can get some hood lighting in here. Much better. All right. So, I know that I didn't hear a hissing or anything like that, but I still want to check for a vacuum leak. The best way to do that is to get a smoke test. However, smoke machines are really expensive. I've got one that I've built. I don't recommend it, so I'm not going to show it, but it works really, really, really well. The other way to do this, which is a lot cheaper and a lot simpler, is to simply use parts cleaner or anything. There is flammable and non-flammable. Make sure that you have the flammable one, otherwise I don't think it will do anything. I haven't tried the non-flammable one, but this is pretty much all I ever use. Anyway, what you're going to do is you're going to spray around the hosed connections and see where the fluid sucks in. Now, a little bit of parts knowledge here. There's two ways that an engine can read airflow. So a lean condition would mean too much air entering the engine or not enough fuel. So the thing we want to keep in mind is the setup of this engine. This is a mass airflow setup, which means it's got a meter reading airflow at a certain point. And anything beyond that, behind it, it can't detect. So if there's a pinhole sized leak right here, the sensor can't pick that up, and that's unmetered air. The other design is what's called a speed density. It's got a manifold sensor that's going to sit somewhere on the manifold, or a hose going to the manifold from a sensor. Those systems don't care as much because they're monitoring pressure and then calculate airflow based on that. And obviously, if there's a leak, pressure drops, the computer knows and can calculate. In extreme cases, they will pick up issues with a large enough vacuum leak, but one's not necessarily better than the other. So in this case, in Toyota's case, they typically use a mass airflow setup, which means if just this clamp is loose from, I don't know, somebody doing a throttle body cleaning service or something like that, that can cause it. And in fact, this was loose, and I thought that was the fix, and it just so happened it wasn't, but it is very possible. But anyway, you take your brake parts cleaner and you'd spray all of your connections where a connection can be made, which means at each clamp right here, a hose clamp here. These are coolant hoses down here, so you don't have to worry about those. The throttle body to the manifold, all of these little vacuum hoses off of it, and you want to spray where the manifold connects to the cylinder head, as well as in the injectors. The injector O-rings can be leaking through in this case, they're in the head or in the manifold, but that's still a vacuum. Also, with these Toyota plastic intakes, you want to spray around the seam where the two plastic housings meet, because they can crack, and they do actually. The AR motors have a problem with them cracking. And you just want to see if your engine dies down some, then that's where you know your leak is. And then you want to fix that leak. So that's the easiest thing to do. We're going to now get into a little bit more complex stuff. Okay, let's talk about this for a second. So I've simulated a vacuum leak again, because what we're going to do now is we did a really quick brake spray test to see if we could get any type of vacuum leak to be found, and we couldn't. So what I've done is I had to resimulate a vacuum test just to show you what my next test is going to be, but it's going to be the same outcome as what I found. And this is evident of a, for lack of better terms, external vacuum leak. This is what you're going to see. So I've got my scan tool hooked up here, and I'm using live data. Again, you don't need any fancy scan tool like this. You just need a code reader that can do live data, which, like I said, you can get from the parts store. So what we're going to be looking at specifically is fuel trims, short-term and long-term. Short-term, which would be highlighted. I don't know if you can see my finger right here. Long-term here. Short-term is, let's talk about fuel trims really quick. Short-term is immediate changes. Long-term fuel trim is based off of the short-term fuel trim over a period of time. So if the short-term fuel trim is at 20, the long-term fuel trim is going to go up to 20. If it's sustained there for more than a minute, long-term fuel trim is going to go up to 20, and that's going to be where the base reading is. and then the fuel trim is going to go back to 0, and then it's going to add more or less based off of that long-term fuel trim. And what these numbers mean is a positive number means that the computer's having to add extra fuel to reach its target where it wants to be. And negative numbers means that it's having to take fuel away from injection pulse to reach its target AFR or RPM. So that's what we're looking at here. Now, with a vacuum leak, what you're going to see is when the engine is idling, the fuel trims are going to be excessive. However, the higher in the rev range you get, the less the fuel trims will thin out. So they'll come closer to 0, which is where you want your fuel trims to be. With Toyota, fuel trims of a combined value of over 35 is when your check engine light trips. And the reason for that is, in the example that I gave my apprentice here, is that say, according to RPM, say you have 5 spray cans on the ground, 5 red and 5 blue. If you have them right next to each other and you take 1 blue away and you take 10 steps back and you look at your group, you'll notice a blue missing really easily. Just like in the lower RPM range, when you have less airflow, if you take a little bit of air or fuel away, you'll notice a difference. Alternatively, if you have 100 red spray cans and 100 blue spray cans just laying on the ground in groups next to each other, if you take 1 spray can away from one side and take 10 steps back, you're going to be hard pressed to notice that there's 1 missing. And what that means is when airflow and fuel flow is in much higher quantities, airflow being red spray cans, fuel being blue, or vice versa, if a little bit is taken away from one side, you aren't going to notice that big of a difference. And that's what's happening here on the fuel trims. When you're higher up in the rev range, that little bit doesn't really make that much of a difference. However, if you're on idle, it does, and the computer reads that. And we can actually see that on the fuel trim. So let's get it cranked up and see what we're looking at. So as you can see, instantly fuel trim shot all the way up to it's 18, 20, they're getting up there pretty high. But, and again, this is a cold engine, so it's revving a little bit, but if I really give it some gas, and I don't know if you'll hear me, so I'll explain now, you'll see the fuel trims drop out. As I give it some ass, the short-term fuel trim dropped out. As you can see, it went down to about 4. That's how you can verify that you have a airflow-related vacuum leak. So let's take a look into the next steps that we should take now that we've verified the kind of vacuum leak that it is. So we verified that we have a unmetered air type of vacuum leak. However, spraying around the intake and around the tubes couldn't find it. So what's our next step? Well, it is possible that we just didn't spray in the exact right spot. So a smoke test would be the easiest way to find it. However, a smoke test still won't show you if the vacuum leak isn't external. And what I mean is that there's different parts of the engine where air can go that we can't see from outside of the engine. Those spots would be the PCV valve, which is really hard to see. There's a rubber hose that comes from a metal pipe and then goes to the back of the valve cover, and then another rubber hose connects to it. If the PCV valve is bad, which is a one-way valve, its original purpose is to let air one way and not the other. If it's bad and it's being stuck, then that is a technical vacuum leak. However, it's not something that we can see. Now, if we were to smoke this engine and take the oil cap off, smoke the intake, and take the oil cap off and we saw smoke, that would mean it's coming back in through the PCV valve. We would have to pinch off the breather. The other place that the vacuum can leak into would be the brake booster if it uses a vacuum brake booster. And an easy way to tell that, there's another check valve on that one, but an easy way to tell that is to simply pop off, oh no, I can't see it. Pop pop off that actual valve. In most cases, that little gray valve there is removable. You just pull it out and see if smoke or air is coming in through there. Or the next spot that you can have your vacuum leak would be the evap system, specifically the purge valve. How the purge valve works is that vapors from the gas tank build up in an external canister. However, they need to be purged or vented. So this valve is going to open only under a certain condition to burn the excess vapors off into the engine. However, if that valve is being stuck open, you're going to have another vacuum leak. And that's about all the places that you're going to have a internal vacuum leak, again, I say. But the easiest way to diagnose those is to simply grab you a pair of pliers or hose cut up, pinch off tools or locking vice grips and pinch off the hoses that go to those certain components and see if number one, your engine speed changes, and number two, your fuel trims change. If your fuel trims change, then you've just found your issue. However, your diagnosis doesn't stop there. So I'll say that I pinched off this hose right here, which goes to the purge valve, and I instantly got my my fuel trims corrected. So I knew that something in the purge system is wrong. Here's the deal. I don't just simply replace the purge valve. I need to check the component and the systems around it. The reason being is I could have replaced the purge valve and this metal line had a crack. I would have still had the same concern, or this rubber hose that goes to the purge valve could have been dry rotted and cracked. Again, I would have had the same concern if I just replaced the purge valve. So what I did was I pulled the purge valve off and I bench tested it, which was simply blowing in through one side. It should be closed when there's no power to it. I blew through one side and I had full airflow. So the purge valve was bad in this case. However, I didn't stop there. I did also check. I blocked off the purge port with a rubber cap and I smoke tested the intake again just to see, and nothing came out from this side of the rubber hose and metal hose. So I knew that it had to be the purge valve and I ordered a new one. It hasn't come in here yet, but that is the definite fix for it. I verified that by, I was able to get in there, clean out that purge valve. I kind of tapped it down a little bit while I was energized and I got the door to close. So it is sealing up now and my fuel trims are perfect. I ran it through what's called a monitor drive cycle, which verified a code is closed, or a code is not present, and it passed. So we know that a new purge valve is going to fix this car, and we're going to get it sent on its way. And that was just a really simple way, no crazy tools, no insane methods, no, you didn't have to have any expensive equipment to do this. I will say that the recommended test that you should do for something like this would be fuel pressure test, which means checking the fuel pump output as well as a leak down test to see if your injectors are leaking. Those are possible concerns. As I said before, a lean condition is not just too much air, it can be too little fuel. So you do want to verify that, but you will need a fuel pressure tester, which isn't expensive, but it is another tool you have to get. And specifically on this Toyota, you have to have a special adapter in order to check something like that. So if you did want to check your injectors and that evap purge valve and the fuel pump, you can break out your multimeter. You'll have to have a wiring diagram to know what you're checking and what voltages are supposed to be. And a lot of the times that stuff isn't always available, especially for newer cars like this. So you'd have to pay for something like that. Rule out the small stuff first. I will make videos in the future about electronic diagnosis and getting a little bit more involved with it. But I'm going to start with basic stuff for everyone else and work my way into more crazy stuff as they come into the shop. So I hope this video helps you guys out. I enjoy making videos like these. I enjoy teaching. So hopefully I can help somebody out. But thanks a lot for watching. Leave a like and subscribe and share if you can. I'm really small. I'm starting out, so I'd like as much help as I can get would be great. Thanks. Just wanted to add really quick, I touched on it in the earlier part of the video, but After you have found the part that's defective and you change it, you want to confirm your fix. This is what's called the drive cycle. So this is how you confirm your fix. On your scan tool, you'll clear your codes, and on Toyota, if you have a bidirectional, you can set it into check mode. If not, it's fine. But what you're going to do is you're going to run it through this cycle here. As you can see here, let me try to do it with one hand. Connects text stream, which is just a scan tool. That's Toyota's scan tool. Turn the ignition on. Clear your DTCs. Turn the ignition switch off and wait for 30 seconds. Turn the ignition switch on and connect your scan tool. Start the engine, and you want to monitor your coolant temperature and make sure that it reaches over 167 Fahrenheit with all accessories turned off. AC, fans, everything like that turned off. Then you want to warm the engine up and let it idle for 2 minutes. And then you want to drive your car between 37 and 84 miles an hour for 5 minutes or more. This doesn't have to be a continuous 5 minutes. If you come to a stop, that's completely fine. As long as it's in the same key cycle, it still counts. So just drive it for a complete total of 5 minutes or more over 37 miles an hour. And then what you want to do is you want to stop, pull over, leave the key on, don't touch the key, and you can even leave the engine running, but then go back into your codes and read your pending DTCs. If you don't have any pending codes, then you are in the clear, your problem is fixed. And there is something called and it doesn't show it. There are monitors you can check as well, depending on what kind of scan tool you have, or code reader. And it will tell you if your monitor cycle had been completed. It'll actually say complete or incomplete, pass or fail. If you don't have access to this, sometimes you can Google them. I pay for this. Don't worry about it. Just drive the car for a few days. If your light doesn't come on, this code is a 2-step code, which means that it needs to happen in 2 key cycles for the light to come on. So if you drive it around for a few days, you'll know. But that's about all there is to it. I just wanted to add this little tidbit of information. If you can find stuff like this, or if you do pay for the service, make sure you watch your confirmation patterns, because we don't want any repeat we want repeat customers, but we don't want them to come back for the same problem. So hope this helps you out. With making videos, I keep thinking about the next thing and the next thing and other really small possibilities that will burn you, but they occur and they have happened to me. This guy, the mass airflow sensor, I don't know if you can see the part number there, but it's a 22010. Take a look at this guy now, side by side. There's the 2210, there's a 0030. So, but they look identical. In fact, they are similar. They're off of the same engine, but one comes from a Corolla, one comes from a Celica, and also different years and iterations matter. These sensors can have minute changes in them that will give you an issue. In fact, I had a Toyota Celica that had this issue come in, and it took me a little while of chasing around. Everything checked out. However, if you look at your airflow data according to what Toyota says, it's a little bit different on the Celica than it is the Corolla. So I actually had to, I couldn't find this in any manual. I had to go to Toyota's website and actually look up the exact part number for the Celica, and I found that whichever one it was not it. So these obviously aren't either of them. The correct one is in the car. But yeah, this burned me because it had a repeat lean code P0171, and I could never find it. And in fact, this happened to me twice on a mid-2000s Corolla and then that Celica as well. Just keep in mind, these are actually good sensors as far as they're checking. They just need to be matched to the correct car. So the other thing is, on top of doing all of your diagnostics, on top of checking wiring and mechanical issues, make sure you have the correct part installed, like the actual correct part, numbered part. On a side note, I had a aftermarket cam sensor on a Dodge, brand new from Intermotor, 2 different sensors, and I kept getting a cam code for it, cam out of sync or something like that. I don't remember. And if you scoped, if you unplugged it and checked your reference voltage in, you got 5 volts. However, if you scoped the waveform pattern, the waveform would only reach 2.5. We happen to have another Dodge sitting in the yard, so I went and grabbed the sensor off of it, and it happened to be an original Dodge sensor. Plugged it in and it was fine. So what we did was we put a Dodge sensor from the dealership back in, and that fixed our problem. So yeah, keep in mind, there's always small stuff like that that you just don't think of that can burn you, so keep an eye out for it. If you're having trouble narrowing down your diagnostic, step out of the box a little bit. Make sure you're checking even good parts to be correct good parts. So, okay. Hopefully that's it for now. Hopefully I don't think of anything else.